This is Rogers TV.
Hello everyone, I'm Jennifer Lokash from Memorial University's Department of English. Welcome to Sparkles 2022, an imprint, we might say, of the Sparks Literary Festival. It has been hard times for organizers of live events like Sparks. We have been thwarted in our efforts to put on a full festival multiple times in these past 2 years. But we have been quietly fanning the festival embers, and this year my colleagues have planned a series of explosive events in flexible formats that continue the project of celebrating the amazing variety of genres, styles, and subjects created by writers in our very midst, crackling with talent and inspiration. Like other Memorial University events that celebrate the rich and sometimes wild literary landscapes of this province, such as our own Visiting Writers series, our Writer in Residence program, and the Office of Alumni Engagement's book club, winningly called Coastlines, to name a few, Sparks has been sharing great writing with appreciative audiences since my colleague Mary Dalton conceived of the festival a remarkable 12 years ago. We are acutely conscious that the beautiful lands on which Memorial's campus are situated and which so vividly take shape in the foregrounds and backgrounds of the work showcased through Sparks are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. We acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We fully commit through Sparks and our other departmental endeavors to honoring these histories and cultures through the crucial work of sharing and promoting many more Indigenous and racialized voices in the years to come. So, what are these sparkles that we are sending up into the universe? Over the next few months, we will be hosting a panel event on genre fiction, an event called 7-Minute Stories, and a spring or summer poetry slam, hopefully in Bannerman Park. We will promote each of these events through our departmental social media and on our Sparks website, so look out for more information soon. For the opening event in the series, we have partnered with Rogers TV, thank you Rogers, to bring you First Pages, readings and interviews with 4 Memorial alumni who will share with us some of their new and exciting work. I will take this opportunity to thank all of the magnificent writers, outstanding interviewers, and brilliant event hosts who will be involved in the Sparkles series. Your generosity and immense creativity is what keep us going. And last but not least, many thanks to you, our faithful Sparks audience, and to readers and lovers of words everywhere.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Boothby. I'm a master's student and a writer at Memorial University, and I'm here today with Sharon King-Campbell to discuss her collection of poetry, This Is How It Is. So hi, Sharon.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So This Is How It Is my first book of poems. I work also in theater. I'm a writer for theater and a performer and a director. And I'm a PhD student, which is how we know each other.
Yes.
I'm in grad school at Memorial University, and this book came out almost a year ago, March 2021.
Nice. Yeah. So this event is called First Pages. So Sharon, if you would like to read the first pages of your collection, which with a book of poetry is a little different than it would be with a novel, because, you know, the poems are not necessarily going to be the ones that Sharon would choose to read.
It was an interesting thing to kind of skim through and find out what were my first
Almost finding
my first
something.
pages of this book, because there are poems in here I've never read in public, and then there are a couple that are like, oh yeah, the ones that I always read, right?
Yes.
So that's interesting. And if you're following along at home, if you happen to be one of the like 300 people who owns this book, and you're following along, you will notice that I'm going to skip ice fog. And the reason for that is that there is a swear word in ice fog. So I can't read it on television, but I'm going to read all of the other ones for the first 10 minutes or so.
Yeah,
this
go
book.
for it.
I am raw as a split fish, insides outside, and the salt preserves. But see, I'm alive, don't you see? I can breathe the air. The center of a traitor's punishment, guts everywhere, and here the crows are coming. For a wetland. We came up with fairies to explain landscapes like this. A pond, a ridge of one stone islands crossing it. To mark the path, a winding stand of birch on either side, their roots submerged and wrapped around the rock. Follow the aisle through the lake's cathedral. Find an apse of tangled branches overhead. Landscapes like this require intervention, a mystical intention. We see wedding arches in bent boughs. We invent this magic, which doesn't mean it isn't real. If folk tales are true, the spiders are the cleverest. Ravens and jackals, foxes will see right through their enemies. It's the carnivores mid-chain, not the prey they capture, but the prey they are, that fascinates. No one tells folk stories about hippos, elk, or bison. They are just for eating, blithely occupy the bottom of the pyramid. The villains are the reptiles, snakes and crocodiles slithering, or the big cats, aloof and sharp. Easy to root for the jackal who only wants to hunt his crabs in peace. Who tells the crab stories? Their tiny bubbles rising to the river's surface, their red shells scuttling into safety in the rich black mud. For Clara Schumann. She hangs the laundry herself. Family of 6, and she alone is able to take care. Each note a step toward the paying of a bill, coal or electric's medicine. Her husband, weightless in his mind but heavy in his body. The burden of him. What else then? The road? A tour of black and ivory stained as yellow as the edge of every blouse. Smooth from fingerwear where seams and lace would fray. With her eyes closed, only music rises, not her pulse. She writes him letters, black on ivory, which he may on any day read with sparkling lucidity or throw away as crumpled waste. She sends the children love in these epistles, and she hopes that they receive it. She who can make a carpeted floor tremble with a finger's flick, or pull tears into eyes with a press from shoulder into keys, she cannot draw him from his bed, eyes clouded as the sky before a storm. A study of last year's rushes. They stand as sentry, spears to sky. If they pricked you, you might fall asleep 200 years. The birds fear nothing. A light on the very tips of them, tails swiveling for balance. Just a feather's width will do. Straw-colored tufts of rabbit's fur reach out to catch the wind with faded Mary Poppins umbrellas. They are what was left by undiscerning breezes before winter, dry but hopeful for a child to reach out for the kitten's tail, carry promise as a burr into a new place where its wings can unfold, parachute it into river mud, a start for a new season. Crows. 1. One for sorrow lands on the eve of our old house, her feathers plaited like armor against rain. She digs in the tin furrow for something, a seed gone stray, a twig. Were she a magpie, the gleam of rain fresh dripped might capture her. One for sorrow is indifferent to my watching, the smallest feather ruffle, not a wince for droplets landing on her black head by our black roof on the eve of any day. 2. 2 for joy. 12 clawed toes in mud, 4 black eyes staring. They leave dinosaur prints. Future archaeologists will wonder at our coexistence with these predators. The black shadows of their prehistoric parents. Their long beaks speak of medicine. Their talons speak of sores. 3 and 4. If I believed in old wives' tales, in rhyming words to make them true, my heart would leap at any sight of black wings, 6 and 8, my magic numbers. If I believed that birds could token birth, I would be on the half-moon porch with birdseed daily. But black wings in gray sky cannot outweigh black letters on gray screen. Uppercase no, or finally, as if in answer to that word, a 2 weeks late weight in my hips, a smear of red to smash the ancient faith of women into the science we believe. Cook Street. This garden bush grows dogberries and hubcaps. There's one of each in its February limbs. Nearby, a crow tears through the neighbor's trash, a dried-out crust still in its branded bag, 2 layers of plastic down. 1 for sorrow, 2 for the euphoria of sated hunger. Another street named for a sailor. The man has statues, vistas, thoroughfares in Australia and the Indies to remember him, and wasn't that enough? And in New Zealand too, and finally Hawaii, where he died when people there rejected him and all his trademark conquest. Down the road, a bar named for a pirate. Sailor thieves, the pair of them. Here in this city named for the man who lost his head to Herod all those years ago. Remember the mango we ate with sticks from crackling plastic? I wanted bananas, but the color of mangoes, orange as sunrise, compelled me to change. Our skewers poked through the plastic cone and juice dripped out into my palm, cool and sticky as our mouths, chins dripping, and our foreheads sprung with sweat and sunburn, soaking our hatbands, and our eyes sprung with tears at the taste, the very taste of a mango picked this morning, carved by a man and a very sharp knife, unwrapped from peel and wrapped in plastic next to popsicles and ice cream. Remember the coconut the man knocked down with the machete he used to slash us through the jungle? He hauled it down with a long hook like a gaff. He hacked the top off, and I drank deeply as Robinson Crusoe, or as one brought to gather sunlight before a winter far from here. Dorian. No storm touched down here, but the water tells us. A new green, peaking white, churned up from below. It says, this wave now splintering against the wharf was once 100 feet, a biblical tower of force. The air knows, too, pulls salt up from the shore to crust our windows. The wind says, see? I will be here long after all your homes have blown away. Only this. My back against your arm, on a sun-warmed bench, on a man-made island in an artificial river. Looks real enough. Easier to discuss the magic of a willow tree when you're not looking at me like that. You say you're happy, and some part of me believes it. You say you're lonely in this green grass, blue sky, brown river. I tell stories about this place. The stories you tell here belong to somewhere else. The wind tangles your hair into mine, and it's too close. I take my weight away from you, an inch of space between us full of history and love. I watch the willow dribble its branches in the river.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great.
Thanks.
So in your work, I've noticed there's kind of this sense of this relationship to place, but also kind of an unplace, belonging and unbelonging. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your relationship to place with these poems, because, you know, they span a vast array of geographical locations and also many years, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, how do you navigate the complexities of the idea of home and place in your work?
Yeah, so I have a really complicated sense of what home is, because I wasn't born in Canada, but I was raised here, and then I grew up in Ottawa, and then I moved to Newfoundland, and living as a settler descendant in North America is complicated. The feelings that I feel about actual geographical locations kind of are tangled up in the history of those places.
Yeah.
And I think the history of places is written on those places. Like, you see it in architecture, and you see it where maybe the stones have been moved around or anything else. And then there are places that seem untouched, but you know they're not.
Yes.
And I think that, like, my specific relationship with the earth is kind of founded on how I relate to the places that I know well.
Mm-hmm.
So even in that reading that I just did, the selection that I did, I mention New Zealand. There are more poems about New Zealand in there. I mention it really briefly. There's a bunch of, like, this is in St. John's, and then the mangoes are in Thailand. I do feel like wherever I go, I have a different relationship to the world based on how I relate to the place.
You read a poem about Clara Schumann.
Yes.
There.
Yeah.
And so there's in this collection, there are multiple poems about historical figures, most notably composers
Mm-hmm.
or biblical figures, female biblical figures.
Yeah.
And as you're reading this collection of poetry, as you read a book, one page onto the next, several of these poems I didn't realize were about composers at first, because they're written in the same sort of temporal moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about these, like, feminist, revisionist, historical poems, and why you chose to make them so temporally ambiguous.
Yes, I totally chose to do that on purpose. And it's, I think it is because I think that the stories that we tell and the stories that come out of history shape the society that we live in. So if I'm going to write a feminist revision, I might as well set it now,
Yeah.
I feel like Clara, who, wouldn't have had a washing machine in her home.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if we think about her being kind of a not single mother of 6, that's, it sets it in a contemporary lens that we understand, right? But it wasn't all that different to what Clara Schumann experienced. And then she, as the female breadwinner in her family, requiring her to be away all the time on tour. Can you imagine, based on, like, now, the judgment that mothers get when they spend their lives on tour away from their families? Can you imagine the judgment Clara Schumann must have been getting based on, So I think that kind of, I think that the stories from then matter to now, and they speak to each other. Mm-hmm. And so we might as well, just put them in between, like, here's a thing that happened to me in 2013, and now.
Yeah, because there's this really wonderful mingling almost of your female contemporary life and these feminist revisionist historical lives, these sort of reimagined lives brought into the now that make them so relatable.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
yeah, this is a bit more of, like, maybe a personal question, but poetry does tend to be
pretty personal.
Pretty personal.
Yeah, it's like, here's my soul.
Yes, I know
it.
We were saying to each other the other day that it's who can write poetry that doesn't have themselves in it,
Yeah.
And so something that I noticed coming up quite a bit, especially in some poems that you didn't read today, like Whale Call and January Has No Business Warming Up Like This.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of discussion of climate change, poverty, capitalism, and there's a sense of cynicism and sorrow that underlies a lot of your poems. And kind of a sense of loss and almost a sense of guilt. Like in Whale Call, you have that great line where you talk about how you're talking about the mother orca that carried its calf in what was widely recognized as mourning and grief.
Yeah.
And then you contrast that with you having this summery Newfoundland day eating blueberries, and you say that, while the whales are out there, our teeth are stained purple with the decadence.
Yeah.
And there's that sense of sort of almost a guilt or a feeling like how as humans can we deserve what we still have?
Yes.
And so I was wondering if you want to talk a little bit about how you try to reconcile these disparate experiences and like these disparate wantings where as humans, you know, we want happiness and beauty, but we also live on this planet that we are part of these harmful systems. Like you talk about the polar bears at one point and how, you know, we can use all the reusable bags and the glass containers we want, but if big industry doesn't get on board, you know, what are we really doing?
Yeah.
And so this sort of sense of like, as humans seeking things that we want, while also knowing that we're part of these damaging systems. And, you know, do you think that it's possible through art and poetry to experience both hopelessness and hopefulness at the same time, I guess?
Yep.
The big question.
I really do. And the big question, the big answer to your big question is yes. I think that art is kind of uniquely qualified to talk about how complicated our stance on things like climate change are. Like how we had a really warm day, like last week.
Yeah.
It was super warm. And I was out with a friend and we were talking about how we have to enjoy that beautiful day because it was given to us. The fact that we assume that that beautiful day exists because the climate is changing and like the acidification of the oceans is inevitable and the ice caps are melting. All of that is awful and doesn't change the fact that we must enjoy the warm day while we have it. And like we should and can. We don't have to take on responsibility for something that we can't change, but we have to be aware of the ways in which we can change it. So big industry does have to get on board. Climate change is a massive problem and it will result in the eradication of the human race, and we have to face that and deal with it. What can I do on Tuesday to make that better? Might be writing a letter to my MP, or it might be just go out for a walk and enjoy that gorgeous sunny
beautiful day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe write a poem.
Or write a poem about it, where you talk about your conflicted emotions, because it's possible to feel more than one thing about a large topic like climate change or colonialism, right? That I am aware that I benefit from capitalism and colonialism and democracy, and I'm also very aware that all three of those things are big reasons why we don't have substantive climate action. Yeah. Right? So it's, it's possible to feel complicated things.
Yes. But overall, like, you know, the collection is a sort of inherently hopeful collection, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very hard to look at mothers and children and not feel hope. And there's a lot of mothers and children in this. In various ways, and I mean the mother whale deserves hope as much as we do. So there's grief there and sorrow and cynicism because we need to learn to think about other things in the world, not just the crabs like digging into the mud or the whales who we can kind of anthropomorphize if we choose to, to like imagine their emotions in human terms, but we also need to think about like trees and rocks and things like that as something that like has a story to tell, that whose presence has value on this planet, not just the value that we can extract and sell in a capitalist system, but a value to the way that the planet does and should function. Yes.
You're preaching to the choir here.
I know.
This is what I like to write about. And I think you do a really good job of balancing that sort of like not anthropomorphizing, but still having empathy for the non-human in your work and embracing that sense of the non-human deserving of hope of their own kind, you know? Like all of us on an equal playing field, the mothers grieving together, you know, whale and human. Yeah, and it's really beautifully done.
Thanks.
So as we're kind of preparing to wrap up, Are there any poems that you wish you could have read today? Or like, what's your favorite poem in the collection?
I try to read Sarah as often as I can. Sarah is one of the revisionist feminist pieces, and it's about biblical Sarah, who was married to Abraham, who's God asked Abraham to sacrifice their only child to him, and then Abraham got up there with his like knife and his son and the fire, and God was like, "Kidding, don't do that." Sarah was not consulted in that story, and I think that is, something that needs just another look.
Yes, definitely.
So I try to read her.
The biblical poems are very interesting.
Yeah.
The revisionist, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Christianity is also one of those founding stories that I talked about right at the beginning, that like Christianity is very intensely tied up in colonialism and Christian values, but also like all of the ways that the story has been told. And if you remember that the Bible is like men wrote down
Yes.
what's in the Bible, and then they chose what to include, right? So by omitting the perspective of the women, they are supporting this whole like Eve is responsible for the downfall of mankind thing that kind of comes along with man being in charge of all the animals, like over the animals, which is not how I feel about the world. Dominionism.
So would you say, as a final question then, that is where the title kind of comes from? Is this sense of, this is how it is for women and non-humans?
Maybe. Yeah, it's also the title of a piece about growing up in a world where a parent has to be away for long stretches of time, and I think it is kind of about, this is how I experience the world.
Well, it's a really great book.
Thanks.
And we encourage all of the viewers to go check it out. And I guess, do you have any pluggables, I guess, social media you'd like to put out there?
Sure. I am on Facebook. Just me, though, not like it's just, who I am. And
just authentic Sharon.
Just me. And I have a website, which is SharonKing-Campbell.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking about your work at the Sparks Festival, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it.
Thanks.
This program is brought to you by